Alright, so today we're going to be talking about Chapter 10, Lesson 5. This is called Using Sampling to Predict. So first of all, we need to talk about what this kind of samples are, and then we'll talk about how we can use those samples to help us predict information from a population. So, let's first of all look at what sample and population is. So a sample is a small group surveyed from a larger group. It's a small group that's surveyed from a larger group. And the population is the larger group. So a sample is taken from a population. Alright, so let's talk about different types of sampling. So unbiased and biased. So unbiased samples are the best kind. These are the best. The reason why is because, again, they're not biased. They're not influenced by any kind of particular side. That's what makes them unbiased. And there's a couple of ways that we can say that they're unbiased. They're either from a large population, random, so they'd be randomly selected from that population, or there's enough data to kind of make a judgment on a population. So let's talk about the three different types of unbiased sample. We have a simple random, and what that literally means is that each person or item, so each thing that's being surveyed, or each item that could be on the survey, is thought to have been equally selected. What that means is if we have like soccer or football or baseball on favorite sports, we're not trying to get people to say, oh, I like football, so we're not picking people who like football that we know that like football. We're picking a random group throughout a school and asking them what their favorite sport is. Now, a stratified random, this is starting to get a little bit more specific, but now this is the same thing as simple, but now we are separating. They're separated into groups. Then simple random happens. So what that means, it's like if I were looking at, well, we just had an election about a month ago, looking at what needs to be done in the area. So it could be representing a population of election districts, and we could be separating them into urban, suburban, or rural. So we could be looking at how each group answered questions. So that way we'd be looking at specifically urban population, how did they respond versus how did a rural population respond. And then systematic is essentially the same thing as a simple. The only difference is this is selected over time intervals. So for example, if a building or a store was trying to get an idea of what someone's favorite item was at the store, they could be saying, oh, every 10 minutes we'll ask someone. Or it could be like every 10th person is another good one. This is an example. So now, biased samples, these are the worst. Because they could be from, well, just the opposite of unbiased. They could be from a small population, or they could be picked to influence the results, or they could be looking at not necessarily representative of a population. For example, asking a student who plays on the football team whether they think the football team needs new uniforms. They're, of course, going to say yes. So it might not necessarily be representative of the population at the school as a whole. So let's look at the two different types of bias samples. We have convenience and voluntary. So convenience is talking about easily accessible. And what that could mean is, well, we have a little bit of time, so I'm going to go to the cafeteria, and I'm going to just figure out, hey, these are the first 10 people that are here. And we're just going to do that. Or it could be looking at, these are the random people that are sitting around me, so I'm just going to ask them. And then the other kind is voluntary response. This one sounds like it should be unbiased because people have the option of going in or not, but generally volunteer responses are people with strong opinions. And usually bad or opposite of what you were hoping for. They could also be involving only those who want to or can participate, where a random is simply sending a survey to all different kinds of people, whether they respond or not. Voluntary is you have to actually respond to them. You actually have to call in to them. So an example, again, could be like a principal sending an email to seniors who are graduating or 8th graders who are graduating, and asking them where they want to show like their graduation. So, of course, only the seniors are asked to vote through an online poll. Now, some students don't have access to the internet. Some students don't have the time to go on the internet. So they might not even get the survey in an email. Or if they just don't have time, they're not going to do it. Or if they don't care, they're not going to do it. So voluntary is a biased sample. All right, so let's look at two different scenarios to determine if they're biased or unbiased, and then how we can use that information to kind of extrapolate data for the population. So, example 1, trying to determine if it's biased or unbiased. It says a hardware store wants feedback on its products and services. The store includes a telephone number on each receipt so customers can call and participate in a survey. Is this biased or unbiased? Well, let's look at the phrase here. And the big important word that we're looking at is can. This means that customers don't have to, which means this is voluntary. So this is a biased sample. In fact, it's voluntary response. And the reason why is because people have the option. To respond. It's not a requirement of purchasing the product. It's not a requirement of getting something in return. All that the store wants to know is how they're doing. So that is voluntary. Example 2 now. Now we're going to be looking at, this is an unbiased sample, so we're going to be looking at how this sample can influence and help us understand a population as a whole. So, Mr. Stevens surveyed every 10th student in the hallway to see where they would want to go on vacation. 48% prefer the beach, 36% an amusing park, and 16% prefer the mountains. Is this method of sampling valid? Yes, it is. It is unbiased. And this is called, let me look at the back here, systematic. And again, it's because every 10th student was surveyed. Every 10th. That is systematic. So it says, if so, explain how many of the 560 students in the school would you expect to say they would prefer the beach? So this one, we're going to use a proportion. In fact, we're going to use the percent proportion. The reason why is because it says that 48% prefer to go to the beach. So part over the whole equals percent over 100. Next step I want to do is do cross multiplication. So I'm going to do 560 times 48 and 100 times x. So 100 times x is 100x. And 560 times 48 is 26 equals 1,900. Divide both sides by 100, and now I get 269. So I would expect 269 students to prefer the beach. All right, this is the end of lesson 5. I know it was a long one, but if you have any questions, please let me know.